Hey everyone, welcome to this webinar. Today we're talking about how to unlock the power in QBRs. So we're going to share some best practices and strategies around that. Welcome to joining this webinar. I'm Johan Nilsson, founder and CEO of Start Deliver. You will of course get this recording after the webinar as well. You will also get the presentation, so we'll share all the material. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. You can post questions during the webinar, or you can get in touch with me through LinkedIn or my email here. So happy to answer all types of questions around this topic and get to know you better. So super to have you. And just a few things before we get into this week's or today's topic. A little bit about us. So Start Deliver, we make a customer success platform. That's one side of us. The other side is that we do Impact Academy, which is customer success training for heads of customer success, for customer success managers. And we do this together with our partner, Lincoln Murphy. So those are the things we do. And speaking of Impact Academy, we have two upcoming programs. I will share some content today from Impact Academy to give you a taste of that one. These are two programs that we are coming shortly, so the 6th of March and the 13th of March. So make sure to check them out online and sign up. Also, another thing we do, every Wednesday, we release a podcast episode, Impact Weekly, where we actually answer a lot of the questions we get regarding customer success. So those you can find, of course, at iTunes or Spotify or other podcast venues, basically. So make sure to check those out as well. Back to today's topic. So today we're talking about quarterly business reviews. I think this is one of the most asked questions. It's a very special topic, and we wanted to dig into that today and help you navigate and get more out of these business reviews. So let's break it down and start from the very beginning here. What is a QBR? QBR stands for Quarterly Business Review. As I assume most of you know this already, but it's a term that's been thrown around a lot, and I think there is a lot of interpretations to what a QBR is. And I would say also that it's one of these buzzwords that a lot of people use for similar to in sales and marketing. People talk about marketing qualified lead or MQL, SQL. There's the similar way where people talk about QBRs. It can even be EBRs, executive business reviews. Account reviews. So there's a lot of buzzwords around this. So today I want to help out also to kind of simplify and make sense of this if you're perhaps new into customer success. So there's a lot of interpretations. Another thing, it's why we're talking about this today, is that it's also a lot of challenges and frustrations with business reviews. We talk to a lot of customer success managers through the weeks and days with both Impact Academy and of course Start Deliver. So we pick up on this, and I want to share a few of these frustrations. And this is a quote. This is actually a podcast episode as well, if you want to check out our answer to this specific question. But this is a person who has been targeted to do business reviews every week, every week. And this person feels it eats up a lot of time and don't see a lot of positive coming out of these QBRs. So that's one of these like frustrations and challenges people feel around these business reviews. Another one, in my QBRs, we never get to the part when we talk about the customer's business. So that's another side of this, that you get stuck in details, you get stuck in technical things, and you never get to talk about the customer's business. Another one, I have a hard time getting through to the right stakeholder when booking or setting the appointment for the business review. Also very common situation, and a lot of frustration around this, of course, as well. This is something I don't think a lot of people talk about, but can be an underlying issue if you struggle with your business QBRs. Afraid to say this, but I'm not confident having QBRs with my customers. So that's being very honest, of course, but I think this can be the case. So when we summarize this, basically, like, done poorly, QBRs can be ineffective. Basically, they waste a lot of time. We don't get any progress. It can also be, of course, that they lower trust. So if we, like in the example here shared from these people, that we don't get the stakeholders engaged in these, so we might not get the results we want. It can also be that they actually hurt relationships. So in the first example there, if we set a target on booking business reviews every month or every week, and we push for that, especially if we're in the leadership of the head of the customer success team, and we push hard to do these business reviews, that can actually hurt relationships. So and in the podcast we actually discussed this specifically, but in general, like if we bring in sales, in new business sales, it's very common to have quota or targets on appointments, for instance, and you bring in that to customer success, it can actually be counterproductive, where you actually force or put a focus on making a specific number of business reviews or meetings with the customer every week. And that's, I mean, of course, that's just if we don't achieve results in those meetings for the customer, that can actually hurt the relationship. So these are some of the underlying issues, challenges, frustrations around business reviews. So how do we move from this, and how can we improve, and what's the steps? I think we need to bring it back to why do we have these meetings with the customer? So I think that's where we need to start. And and even if we have these frustration and challenges, are business reviews bad? Not necessarily, but we need to be very clear on what the purpose is, and that's where I want to start this. And let's look at the life cycle stages, and let's look at how it looks, how a typical journey looks like for a customer. During the sales process, usually we talk a lot about what the business goals are for the customer. What are they trying to achieve? And that's something that we risk losing focus of as time goes by. Post-sign, we get into this onboarding phase. It's usually more technical. It's about setting up things, creating the account, and so on. And we kind of stop talking about what they're trying to achieve. Usually it's about them, increasing sales, revenue, lowering cost, removing risk. Those are the high value points, but we need to break them down into the specific goals that we can help them achieve, right? And this is something you discuss in quite a lot of detail during the sales process, and post-sign, that can deteriorate basically and go down. And if this graph, this blue, is how much we talk about customer goals, if we don't have meetings with customers, if we don't do business reviews, we risk this becoming, this going down, deteriorating, and eventually, everybody knows it will end up in a churn, right? So this is the reason behind. And ideally, QBRs or meetings, if you prefer to call them meetings, should be about bringing back what the customer's goals are. Put that back up on the agenda. So similar to, we have discussed this during the sales process, after onboarding, in the adoption phase, or wherever we are in the life cycle, we should have these meetings, these business reviews, to talk about how are we doing? Are we achieving the customer's goals, what they're trying to do with us? That's the main purpose behind this business reviews, the QBRs, and any format you bring them. We'll get back to that later as well. What type of format can we do these business reviews? So, very key point here, our relationship in customer success is to help the customer achieve their goal. And a goal is about an objective and a timeline. So what we talked about in this sales process, that goal, hopefully we achieve that after onboarding, and then it's time to set the next goal. And unless we didn't achieve it, we probably need to restart and get going again. So it's a very important part of our job in customer success. And I think the business review or the customer meeting, we have, that's the excellent time to bring this up on the agenda again and bring everyone together around this. And as a consequence, when we bring up the goal, this will help us with all the things we want to achieve. From our point of view, if we have a risk customer, we want to turn them around. We need to get back to what the customer is trying to achieve with us. What is their goal? The same thing if we have a platform that we can expand on. We usually have targets to expand on a customer. And again, talking about the customer's goal is our way to drive expansion sales. So this is fundamental to get I would say the top 2 priorities in customer success: reduce churn, increase expansion. It starts with the goal. Speaking of goals, it's very easy in theory. It's a lot harder in practice. So what we do in Impact Academy and what we have helped a lot of customers with is what we call goal discovery. Because it's very easy to say we need to talk about customers' goals, but it's a lot more difficult to arrive there and make this discussion happen. And customer goals is not about like we setting the goal for the customer. It's about the customer saying what they want to achieve, right? So we need to think about that. We need to work on this, and I think discovery is a great term here, because we need to help the customer sometimes understand what their goal is, clarify what the goal is, and especially if we want to quantify it and put a timing on it, it's even more about the discovery. So it's many times, and I hear this a lot, is that the customer don't know what the goal is. They don't know. They just bought this and they want it, but they haven't articulated what the goal is. And here we need to help them. So discovery is about having ideas around this. It's a lot about having social proof to help them. We did this for another customer. Is this similar to what you're trying to achieve? And it's also about bringing the right people into the room. Ideally, we have this type of clarity when we talk with a customer. This is, of course, an example. We need to, in the coming 12 months, increase sales by 500,000 in ARR, which means 100 new customers at 5,000 average contract value. So that type of detail, very few get there, but this is where we should aim to be on this level. And of course, it all depends on my product. How can my product fit into this higher goal? And that's where so you need to break it down one level to see where do we fit into this. But this is what we aim for this is the purpose of the business review, to arrive at to understand, identify, discover, and get the customer behind. This is what we're trying to do here. The next part is, how do we do this? What is the ideal way of meeting with customers? And I think this is also changing a lot. This is where some of the frustration in the examples in the beginning here, they come from things are changing. We all know what happened through COVID. Everything moved online more or less. So we need to reevaluate, how do we do this with the customer? And also from the customer side, what is their appropriate experience? Basically, in what way do they want to engage with us? I think sometimes we look from our side, we look very much inside out, and we say we need to have these business reviews every week or every quarter, of course, but and we push for them. We want to go out and meet the customer, but is that the appropriate experience for the customer as well? And this can vary within your customer segments, of course. Physical meetings, I think that's more, I mean, it's very traditional. That's still a lot, it's a lot of value to meet in person, but things are changing, right? Web meetings, of course, most of us do a lot of web meetings with the customers. Async, basically having recorded content, having recorded material that they think they can consume at their own when it suits them. It's growing a lot, of course. Collaboration. Most of us work in a collaboration way with our customers. And how do we facilitate this? And how do we match this to what we're trying to do in the QBR? So the modus and how we work with the customer is evolving. Things are happening here. I would say that it's a mesh. And specifically, if you have a wide customer base, you will do different with different customers. But take this into account as well when you look at how you conduct your QBRs. We don't want to end up being someone chasing someone to have a QBR that they don't want, basically. And that's, I think, sometimes the case. So beware of that. Let's also look at the typical QBR agenda. So this is an example. We have the agenda points here. So meet the team, who's who on both sides. A customer update, what's going on their side. We talk about the goals. We talk about the KPIs. Are we on track? We may cover some about the usage, adoption, and so on. We share our product roadmap and what we see could be interesting for them going forward. And then you plan the next steps. I would say this is a very typical agenda for a QBR. It's quite heavy. Sometimes this is perfect. Of course, sometimes this is too heavy and might not suit the customer. So a good point here is to audit what do we need to have in our meetings. First of all, I mean, the QBR, if you have a really good, if you achieve, if you can discover the goal of the customer and you can implement some actions from that, I think those are the most important meetings you can have with a customer. But other stuff on the agenda, maybe those are not required. Maybe that lowers the bar to have this business review together, or maybe you can put that in an async format. Maybe you can cover that prior to the meeting. So audit what you want to have in the business review and think about it from the customer perspective. Think of it maybe even from different customer segments perspective to make it really relevant for the customer. Also, when we talk about the format for these QBRs, the key here, and I would say this is, of course, this is very evident, but I would say a lot of the time when we feel we're not effective with our business reviews and QBRs, we lack on the follow-up and the next steps from the meeting. And it comes back to preparations. We will talk a little bit about that later. But ideally, after a QBR, you should have an immediate follow-up. It might be that you need to block some time in your calendar to have these. And you need to manage, of course, the expectations. If we arrived at some really good next steps in the meeting, when can we deliver on them? So we don't miss from our side. But the follow-up is the key thing from following the meeting, of course. And talking about next steps, a very common situation is that the business review ends up being a lot of work for us and very little for the customer. And that could be a risk, or there is a lot of work that has to be done on their side, but we haven't been clear on that. So the key in the next steps here is to have joint accountability, basically having the customer understanding their part, what they need to do on their side, and having them commit that they will do that. And this is the challenge usually. We know what we need to do. We usually can do that because it's our customer, but the things the customer has to do, and this can be both in your platform, outside of your platform, those are the critical things that will make the difference if we want to move this customer forward. And this is something you need to plan for, and joint accountability is a big topic. We will not go further into it today, but it's a key thing to get the most out of the meeting. So take that with you, and we will come back with more around that later. So we know the goal is important. We know the format is important. How can we get the most out of the meeting? What more can we do? And coming back a little bit to the frustrations we had in the beginning, when I think we had a few examples saying the same thing more or less, and that's, we have a hard time at reaching the stakeholders. We have a hard time setting the appointment. We have a hard time getting the right people from the customer side in the room. And of course, many times it can be that we as I mentioned earlier, maybe we have too big of an agenda, or we are not doing it in the way they prefer. But there's also some other things to think about here. So if a customer is ghosting you or not responding, it's usually one of the three, that you either are not the priority, we'll get back to that, or that we mean just more work for them and they don't have a goal, so they don't see the value of doing the work, or things have changed on their side. So we need to be aware of this, especially if we struggle with getting these business review, putting them in the calendar, making them happen. These are things to consider. So we need to have a full context. If we want to get the most out of this business review, we need to have a full context on how things are going with the customer. So we need to, of course, be on top of the commercial side of things. How much ARR, or how big is this customer for us? What is the potential? How does the contract look like? That's one side of the story. We also need to understand how is the usage. Are they using our platform? Are they using every part of the platform? Are they happy with us? How is the experience part? Do we have we received any bad feedback? How is the support situation? Are we solving all the issues? Very common that customer success managers go out in a business review and they're thrown with things happening, or bugs, or issues, integrations failing. So we need to have the full context. We need to understand who's who on the customer side. Very common situation is that the decision maker or a stakeholder has changed on their side, and we haven't picked up on that. And of course, that's going to be significant for us when we want to have a business review together. So we need to understand these things, the changes, the developments. We have to have the full, complete picture of the customer to make this an efficient meeting. Because if we know all these things, then we can prepare for the meeting. We can go into it open, talking about customers' business, understanding their goals, or discovering their goals together. But if we have any issues here, we will not get there. So one of the frustrations in the beginning was that they never got to talk about the business on the customer side, and it usually has to do with there's a lot of other things going around, and the customer only wants those to be fixed before they even open up and talk about other stuff. Another important thing here, so we need to have the full context. What a lot of times forget about is also what is the view of me as a CSM in the eye of the customer. We call it positioning, and this is a real thing, and a real thing for customer success managers. And positioning is about how do the customer perceive us. And a lot of times when we don't get through, when we are not important for the customer, it's because they have a bad positioning of us. And just to share a few here, or some of the most common ones, I would say, a lot of times we are seen as glorified support. And especially, and this might be the case when we do the support as well. But this is one position that can be bad for us, because they will, why are you calling me? I'm the CEO. Don't you handle like when we want to change users, or want to import a file, or so glorified support is a bad position when we want to have a business review, a quarterly business review. Being a product specialist is also a common position that we can end up in. We are of course product specialists, and we know everything about the product. And the customer sees us as someone that can explain how to set up properties or how the API works or similar. And they will not talk, they don't see us as someone to talk about their business goals, how things are going, what they want to, how they want to grow, how they want to reduce cost, or whatever the high level goals are. Problem solver, another position that we can end up being. They send problems to us. That's what we do. So they push problems to it. It might be support-like problems, but it can be other type of problems. We just solve them, and that's what they want to do with us, and they don't have time. If we reach out to them, they don't understand why, because they're used to sending problems our way. And the last one here is customer assistance. So everything they want us to do, everything the customer needs, we do. We want to help them with everything, and we just do it, and they get used to that, and they also don't see us as a strategic advisor, someone that they can rely on when discussing the bigger picture. So positioning is really key, and really the first part to improving the positioning is to understand that there is a perception of us, and what we need to look at to reposition ourselves is that we need to understand how a good position looks like. And this comes back to authority. A customer, especially if you want to talk to a decision maker, a stakeholder, which are the ones that bought the product in the first place, which are the ones that probably have the power in the organization to make changes, to improve things, and to move things, then we need to be an authority in their eyes. And that can be a subject matter expert. It can be a coach. It can be an advisor. So we need to think of how can we perceive ourselves more in that way. And there's a lot of ways to do that. But just to share a few, I mean, one great way to do here is also to use social proof here, to rely on things we have done with other customers. And even if we don't have a huge long background as an advisor to this type of customer, we can always rely on the other customers we work on, especially if we have a few cases. That's a great way to position yourself. But this is work. You need to work on this, and it's going to make a difference. And you need to be also bold here. You need to. We had one person sharing that they are not confident going into a business review. And this is also down to how we perceive ourselves and how we prepare, how we understand our product, understand what the product's purpose is, but also understanding what's in it for the customer, and daring to ask those type of questions. So we need to talk about them. We need to dare talk about them, and we need to agree together with them on a plan on how to achieve their goals. And this is not something that if you feel you have to reposition yourself, this is something you have to work on. And this is something we go into depth in our Impact Academy, but I want to share a few things, how we work on this. And it's a key thing to really get the most out of the business review. We need to go into the meeting with the right position. That's going to make probably the biggest difference as well. So those are the things we wanted to share in the webinar today. There's a lot to cover in this area. Hope this helps, and good luck having really great business reviews. Thanks from us. We will take some Q&A in the end, but thanks for joining. We mentioned async. Async is the question here is, what do we mean with that? Great. Sorry for being not explaining that in full detail. Async is typically it's a video. That's the easy way to call it. There's many vendors of this, but Loom has made a thing around this, for instance. But you make a recording instruction. Async is that basically it's not as when you meet in person or you have a live meeting. They can read on their own. They can watch this video on their own. They can do work on their own, whether it's prior to a call or to a business review or post a business review. So that's what we mean by async. Any guidance on how to best scale QBRs? they take a lot of time and effort, especially if you have many accounts, how to best make this process, including preparation, more efficient. Great question. And actually, the first step here is to go back to talk about capacity planning. Because if you have 200 accounts and you need to do a quarterly business review with everyone, that's a lot of meetings, right? And is that going to fit into everything else we want to do with our accounts? If we have of course inbound coming at us, we have onboardings, perhaps we have a lot of things on our table. So we need to be doing real capacity planning. I can share a link to that, but capacity planning is not just splitting ARR on the number of CSM. It's also looking at what does our customer need to be successful. And how does that happen? And business review are a big part of that, but you need to see what is involved, what is the preparation involved, how many hours are that, how many hours are the follow-ups, and so on. And that's the real capacity planning you have to do. Great question. No easy answer to that one. But my general point here is do less business reviews, but with higher impact. And you get higher impact by preparing, by being very focused around the business goals of the customer and having the right people from the customer in this business review. And it can be a web meeting. It doesn't have to be physical. It can be quick, fast, but it needs to cover those things. Given that you understood the goal of the customer and there is neither negative or positive progress, is it worth to do a QBR with the particular client or perhaps that particular agenda point of the QBR? I think progress is the most important thing when you look at the customer. A customer can have really poor data in general, but if we're doing progress, that's very good. Negative progress, basically going backwards, less and less users, less engaged users, and so on. That is a very bad sign. So progress, not having progress is not good. And if we understand the goal, I think the next step would be to see why are we on track to that goal, and how do we help in that goal, and how could we speed up or make us reach the goal faster, or can we do more after we met that goal? So, if it's very clear the goal, yes, you can skip it on the agenda point, but then it's even more important to understand how do we together work on achieving the goal? What can we do on our side? What do you have to do on your side? And probably that's where you should spend the time. Is it a good idea to combine your QBR meeting with an account manager who is responsible for upsell? Great question, and this comes back to how you set up your organization and responsibilities. I would say definitely if you have a combined role where you are a customer success manager, where you're more responsible for the success of the customer, meaning they are using your product service to achieve their goals, and you have a account manager being responsible for the commercial side, basically the contract, the renewal, the upgrades, and so on. Definitely go together in the meeting, but prepare and make sure who's doing what in the meeting. And again, how do we make the meeting about them? So the account manager is not there just to push something, and we know they are struggling with the product they have or what they already have, because that's going to set you up for failure. So you need to be very in sync there. But I think it's a great, if you have that set up, definitely both of you should be in the meeting. What data points do you usually present in the QBR? I think the data points, this is something that you actually can do. Speaking of async, you can share like how like account review data prior to the business review, to say this is how we're doing. These are this is how the usage is looking for you. These are many active users. This is the teams, they are up and running. We have achieved your adoption over the platform is so and so. So you can share a lot before, but spend more time in the business review actually talking about the customer goals. If you have them, my experience is that a lot of times we don't even have a clear goal or have discovered a goal together with the customer. So spend more time there. And then for the next business review, the data points should be, how are we tracking towards the goal? And you can break it down in success milestones, basically saying, we want to increase revenue by X by this time. A step by there is doing these things. And let's focus on the first milestones together. And in the next business review, we'll see where we are on our way or not to that milestone. So we need to make this practical, and it's not about looking at a lot of data points. I would say it's more to have a focus and really make sure that we engage the customer in why they have us as their vendor and the steps. So we can track that we're doing steps, we're having progress. I think the progress part is key here. Last question was about if you can replay this. Yes, you will get the recording, so you'll get that soon from us. Thanks a lot again for everyone staying for the Q&A, and talk soon.